I've been interested between the gap of the ignorant and the knowledgeable, and this is a hyper true relationship that happens in life, which consists of the teacher and the student. So this is the mother and the child. This is actually going to school. This is the old and the young. This is this transaction of knowledge, and it's something that you can say why our generation is. The problems of this generation are responsible with the teachers, because they're the ones that kind of are the examples that the students look up to. And that led me to think to a couple big questions. So, firstly, like, when exactly should a student become a teacher? Like, what degree should you even tell people what to do? Like, you have, like, a coach at basketball, but they're not the one on the field. And, like, what about us? Like, I remember last episode we were saying about how there was two girls playing mobile games, not talking to each other, and in our heads we're telling someone what not to do, but what kind of gives us the right to do that, even though it's something that, like, a lot of people would agree on is not very sociable and unhealthy. But, like, what kind of, like, no one kind of knows about that. And so, can you ever give advice ever? Like, can anyone give advice? So that's the first big question. I'll hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I see what you mean about the kind of universality and significance of this mentor-mentee relationship. This person with more knowledge teaching a more ignorant person or a aspiring person. I think that goes way back to, you think about our ancestors sharing stories around the fire, or teaching a young one how to raise children through example, or how to hunt, or how to be a good leader in the community. Or just, you can imagine that psychological dynamic has been in our species for tens of thousands of years, right? And the question of what makes what gives someone the right to be a teacher, I think there's two sides to it. If you genuinely are creating some sort of mentorship relationship, then the mentor has to have evidence of competence and strong morals, and skill in that discipline, and the ability to articulate how to perform that skill and how to improve at that skill. But for advice giving, that's more interesting. That's with people who don't maybe have the evidence of competence or qualifications or experience. But then that's free advice that people can pick up or put down depending on how they feel. It's not like me and you have created a strategic mentor relationship with the people that listen to us speak. We're just, a lot of the time, just talking to the void and just putting our information and our opinions out there, open to criticism, or open to people to like it or not like it, or whatever. Whereas my coach, for example, that's a specific context where I've gone to him and gone, I want to improve at this thing that you have great experience and evidence of competence in, and I'm trusting you to be my teacher in that. Does that make sense? I feel like that's the difference between mentorship and advice. Is advice can be given out but not necessarily taken in, whereas a mentorship is much more defined and clear and practical and strategic.
I think, yeah, I agree that there's a difference in this level of kind of teachership, and with that, I think people should be able to give advice, and then it's up to the student whether they want to take it. It's like there's this, in a business context, there's this economist called Adam Smith, where he basically said, one thing that he said was that it's not the responsibility of the butcher, the baker, or the craftsman that you want your bread, meat, and tools, and that is the person actually consuming it. It's their free will that they're choosing to obtain this information. And so I think a mentor is more of it's going to be more of a, like, the student has wanted more advice from the same source. Mm-hmm. So that goes to the student. Is the teacher's there to give out advice, and to some degree I think we're all teachers, to be honest, because we've all got our unique stories. And so I think my answer would be, we are all teachers, but we're still also all students. The young sing of the eternal student. It's you're a teacher to the person that's 2 steps below you, and a student to the 2 steps in front of you. This information just kind of goes around, and it is kind of like a commodity.
Yeah, I agree. I think the mentor relationship becomes more solidified when the student has seeked out that information and that guidance. I think advice is just what anyone can give and just spew out into the ether, and people can pick and choose what they want to listen to and what resonates with them. Whereas a true, like a clear, true teacher-student relationship comes when the student wants to learn and has approached the other person for that knowledge. I think maybe that's the big point of difference for me.
And I think there's also a very big difference between objective and subjective information. Like, that's what most the advice is mostly going to be subjective. And there's a thing of there's the bad side of things. We spoke before about sort of critiques on objective truth and scientific truth, but there is one critique of subjective truth, which is that, well, this history is only written by the victors, so it's kind of distorted. There's this bias in it. I think that that's the thing about science and engineering. There's actually no bias in it, which is, I remember hearing Lex Friedman, that engineering should be the only subject taught in schools, because you can't really disagree with it. So there's that, which is this universal information. Whereas if you want something more specific, where you go to a subjective teacher and you try and follow the road to subjectivity and in whatever passion that you're going to choose, yeah.
Well, maybe I maybe think about it another way and go, maybe that's what the difference between mentorship and true teaching compared to advice is, that mentorship gives you the objective way to do something better or well, whereas advice is a subjective idea of how to do something better. So, for example, me and you waffling on a podcast, just yapping about people playing on mobile games in lectures or whatever. That's our opinion that's not a good strategy. When there isn't a code or a real clear way that's optimal to sit in a lecture or sit in a coffee shop with a friend, right? Whereas if I go to my coach and ask him, right, how do I run a pick and roll, or how do I shoot a 3-pointer best I possibly can? Well, that's not really a subjective thing. There are actual principles for how you should position yourself and how you should move with the ball, and then how you should have your hands oriented when you shoot, and things like this that have to be passed down to me. That's not his opinion, that's just how basketball works, and he's a vessel for that information. Does that make sense?
Yeah, the two have to come together. It's in a company, you tend to have the old experienced executives that are oh no, this will never work, no, this is the way we've always done it. And then you have these new sort of naive, sort of delusional talent that come in, that then throw out this new creative thing and conflict. These two parties normally conflict. And so I think the two kind of goes back to the hemispheres. They have to come together, and for then the student, it's then your responsibility to pick the best advice and accumulate the wisdom in the right way, because we're at an age with infinite information that's accessible. And well, what do you do with that? The student kind of picks what advice he wants, and I think it's it's on a scale of like what's going to be most effective. I mean, you're going through life, and you can basically choose to do nothing and like just kind of consume films and consume social media and consume books if you want to, but like that learning is like, it's very surface level. There's no depth in that. Or you can go maybe like, I think it's an input output thing for the student, where like maybe like it's very standardized that this like just consuming, and then you got the next level up, which is kind of going to be like probably consuming something better, like maybe a philosophy book, like that will help you as a student to make good decisions in life, but it's kind of generalized maybe, and it's not specific. So then you go for something a bit more specific, and you get a mentor, and then he can kind of translate his own teachings onto you, which he would have laboured hard for. And then above that, I think it's probably the top of your own experience, your own failure, and it's that's the ruthless way of doing it. It's like yesterday I made a big mistake of like, I had some beef and I was supposed to cook it for 1.5. I was supposed to cook it for 2.5 to 3 hours, like boiling it. I cooked it for 2.5 hours, but I just put it in the oven, and so it came out and it was just black as a crisp. All these like beef bits. And so but that's me making that mistake firsthand, and like I'm not going to do that again. No. Because I know that boiling something is going to be different to putting it in the oven.
Yeah,
I could have read that, but if I did read that, I would have just been like, yeah, okay, like I'm not, like it just comes in me and goes out the other ear. Like I'm not, like it doesn't stick because when you do something like and you fail, it sticks.
Or like yeah, and another element of that is, for me, I feel like you have to, the information has to matter to you for it to really go in. And so for me, my two things say that are most crucial for me to really, for a psychological idea or theory or experiment or quote or concept to really stick in my brain, it has, the way I conceptualize it is it has to fit into the web of knowledge that I currently have. It has to be linking to things that I already know and understand, and it has to matter in my reality. It has to sort of slightly affect the way that I think about the world. Or from a basketball perspective, I can't just be told how to do something. I have to watch somebody else do it and then try and do it myself, and try and kind of recreate those bodily movements and imitate it and make it real and consolidate it in my brain. And yeah, you have to do things yourself. It has to make sense to you. It has to fit into your worldview for it to matter, and therefore for it to be sort of absorbed properly and taken in. But yeah, that's funny about the beef.
Another example is I met these kids on my way back from London called Mo and Matthew, and they were two 17-year-olds interviewing people on the street together, trying to get business knowledge for their TikTok and for themselves. And I just thought, like, that's such a good thing to be doing for a 17-year-old. You're going past all the different layers and getting straight to the truth. Like, you're literally like extracting the knowledge straight from the world, like really grabbing the world and like, what do you have to say to me? Like, literally, like these guys, they ran into just like there's a YouTuber. They just casually, I've seen on one of their clips that they didn't know who the guy was, and I did. Like, they just ran into this random guy because they know the spots where these guys hang out. Like, it was crazy to like. It was so cool to see, and I think also just like preparation only takes you so far. Like, you consume something, and you think you know, but you know, you don't know the kind of like the twists and turns of and the failure of it. Like it's like Plato's cave. Like, you consume something, but really you're just watching some puppets. I'll just briefly explain Plato's cave, because I don't know if people know. So there is a concept where there's people who are in a cave, and I think they're like tied up, and they can only see through one wall and the light from the cave. And so behind that, there's some people with like puppets, and they're kind of teaching them about kind of what the world's like and stuff like that. And the concept is like these people learn from just the cave, and they think they know about the world, but they don't realise there's this whole world outside the cage that when they're not tied up, they can go and experience. So it's this like there's it's an illusion. And just to finish off, there's this really nice thing that Alex Hormozy said on Diary of a CEO recently about this entrepreneur life cycle, where you start off with uninformed optimism, where you hear something about a friend who's got this really cool thing going, and so you try it out yourself. And then when you start it and you realise it's harder than you think, you get this informed pessimism. And then at the bottom of that, there's this valley of despair where it's way, way, way harder than you think, and you reach a breaking point of, do I even carry on with this? It's draining all my energy. But then from that, the ones that do carry on reach this informed optimism, where they actually start getting results. And then at the end, it's achievement, and then you go and then you're the one telling the friend about what you do, and they then go into informed pessimism. So that's what I mean about the twists and turns, that actually consist of doing a thing that we just see on a surface level, and when really we're in Plato's cave.
Yeah, nothing tests your learning and your abilities like doing the thing and execution. You know, for me, I think about it very, very plain and simple. In June, I will have an international tournament if I get selected and sort of don't get a career-ending injury in the next few months. So likelihood is I'll be there. And I had an international tournament in June last year, so there's a great year comparison. And I feel like I've grown so much as an athlete over the last, 12 months by the time it comes to Worlds in June. And I feel like I understand the game of basketball more, and I feel like I can be more competitive and be more effective on the court. But we'll have a clear opportunity to see if that's really true when the thing happens, when I have to go out and do the thing, when I get put on the court and see what will happen. And there's nothing quite like that. You can take as many. I love that. I think sport is such a great microcosm for many aspects of life, just like the one you said there, because you can take as many shots as you want in practice. People can use words to describe to you how to run certain plays or write it on a coach's board, and you can do as many reps in the gym as you like. But when it comes to the actual moment to go and do the thing when it matters, can you do it then? Can you execute? Can you put it into practice? And there's no greater test of our learning than that. And you can use that for any pursuit.
Just to sidetrack a little bit, I heard something the other day about how 70% of Olympic athletes get gold medal syndrome.
Whoa.
That's a lot. But
terrifying.
Do you reckon that's true?
70% sounds like a lot, doesn't it? But I do. If the question is, do I think that the majority of athletes, after they get to the top of their game, will feel some kind of drop in their mental health and motivation? 100%. 100%. Do I think it's as extreme as like depression that's defined in gold medal syndrome? Maybe that's open to interpretation. But think about it in anything that you've done or I've done or anything anyone does in their life. As soon as you reach a milestone or you achieve the thing that you set out to do, it feels good for a little bit, and then there's this drop in positive emotion when you return back to normal and realize that life just carries on. Yes, you've achieved another thing, you've gained another title, you've surpassed another milestone, but life is just life, man. There's always going to be, shits to do and dishes to clean and food to eat. It's just, that's life. it's not going to drastically change no matter how many medals you have or what titles you have. So it's a cautionary tale, that kind of stuff, isn't it? I mean, it was a great reminder that achieving stuff isn't what you really want, which is paradoxical but useful to know.